Earlier this year, I had the opportunity to go to Italy, one of the most vibrant and significant places for religious history in the entire world. Now, originally I was supposed to attend a conference in Rome that was sadly cancelled, but I still saw an opportunity to go to the country and to experience some of these significant historical places, some of them for the first time and others for a second time, since I've been to some of these places before. And of course, to capture some of these places on film. Now, there's so many places and things to see in Italy, and you can really only do so much in a single trip like this. But the first place that we went to, of course, was Rome. Now, Rome is Rome. I don't have to say that much more about it. It's one of the most important historical cities. It's a city that has seen empires rise and fall, religions and cultures come and go. It was, of course, the center of the great Roman Empire, at least the western part of that empire, and just has an incredibly significant history. And for religious history, and for especially the Catholic Church, it's the seat of the Vatican, essentially. It's the place where the Vatican is located, which makes it basically the center for the Catholic Church, historically and today. This is St. Peters Basilica in the middle of Vatican City. This is the largest church building in the entire world and the seat, you could say, of the Catholic Church. Only about 2 weeks ago, on that balcony over there, the new Pope, Leo XIV, stepped out to officially be announced as the new leader for the Catholic Church. It is arguably one of the most beautiful buildings in the entire world. It's believed that St. Peter, one of the major disciples and apostles of Christ, is buried in that church, along with many of the popes across history that have served as the Bishop of Rome / the Pope over the centuries. Here on the square there are several events and happenings going on all the time. There is something that's supposed to happen just in about 10 minutes, some sort of procession. And really this whole thing you see here behind, this is the Vatican, right? So it's the Basilica. There are the mysterious secret Vatican archives over there that I know a lot of you are very interested in. There is the Sistine Chapel over there. So this is a very, very historically significant and beautiful place. And it's a privilege to be here. And I should stop talking now because they're beginning here. So.
Entre as mulheres, e bendito é o fruto do vosso ventre, Jesus.
Santa Maria, Mãe de Dio, prega per noi peccatori, adesso è nell'ora della nostra morte. Amen.
Ave Maria, cheia de graça, o Senhor é convosco. Bendita sois vós entre as mulheres, e bendito é o fruto do vosso ventre, Jesus.
Santa Maria, Madre di Dio, prega per noi peccatori, adesso è nell'ora della nostra morte. Amen.
Ave Maria, cheia de graça, o Senhor é convosco. Bendita sois vós entre as mulheres, e bendito é o fruto do vosso ventre, Jesus.
Santa Maria, Madre di Dio, prega per noi peccatori, adesso è nell'ora della nostra morte. Amen.
Ave Maria, cheia de graça, o Senhor é convosco. Bendita sois vós entre as mulheres, e bendito é o fruto do vosso ventre, Jesus.
Santa Maria, Madre di Dio, prega per noi peccatori, adesso è nell'ora della nostra morte. Amen.
Rome and Vatican City are simply amazing places to visit, there is no doubt about that. We visited St. Peter's Basilica as well as the Sistine Chapel, which I hadn't seen before. Actually, I've been to Rome, I've been to the Vatican, I've been to the Basilica before, but I never got into the Sistine Chapel last time. So we made an effort to do that this time, and of course it was incredible. It's a beautiful place, especially the chapel itself. The magnificent work of Michelangelo on that ceiling is just breathtaking. But of course, there is an aspect of visiting Rome, which is the experience of tourism when you're there. And of course, you're contributing to it because you're a tourist. But it's well known that this is one of the most well-visited cities in the world. And when you visit, especially in high season like this, and this year it's also a Jubilee year, so it's even worse, the crowds were crazy in Rome, right? And with the risk of sounding like a travel vlogger or something, I definitely recommend going to Rome. It's a beautiful, beautiful city in many ways, especially if you want to visit these sites. And that's why I think it's legitimate for me to say this as a public educator in religion, is that if you want to visit these places in Rome, maybe try to go on an off season at least, because the crowds can really get absolutely insane. You can see these, this footage from within the museum that led to the chapel, where it's just corridors where you're walking and you're moving very slowly because you're just cramped in a crowd of people. And maybe some people like that. For some, that might be very uncomfortable if you're claustrophobic, for example, and have those kinds of problems with anxiety. So keep that in mind. It's definitely a place that I recommend visiting if you're interested in religious history. But there is that caveat of the crazy amount of people visiting along with yourself. But of course, there are other places to visit as well outside of the most crowded areas, like St. Peter's Square, for example, that still are very significant historically and for the Catholic Church. This is the Basilica Santa Maria Maggiore, the Basilica of St. Mary Major. Scholars agree that this is one of the earliest churches here in Rome. It's one of the four so-called papal churches, and one of the most significant in the Catholic Church. It's dedicated, as the name suggests, to Mother Mary, and indeed it might be the earliest such shrine dedicated to Mary, definitely in Rome, but also really in the world. Scholars believe that it was constructed sometime in the 430s AD, and specifically in the aftermath of the Council of Ephesus. Now, this is one of the early church councils that determined certain aspects of Christian orthodoxy. And specifically what was discussed at this council was whether or not Mary could be called the Mother of God, Theokotos in Greek. And so some believed that this was a legitimate term for her, others did not. And this, of course, boiled down to a certain Christological debate, whether or not the divine and human natures of Christ are separated from each other. And so what would become the majority of the church, orthodoxy, so to say, they believe that indeed Christ was, of course, fully human and fully divine, and thus that Mary was legitimately or could legitimately be called the Mother of God because of that. Another group believed that was an illegitimate position because they believed that the human and divine natures of Christ were somehow separated, and this was a position that was associated with a guy called Nestorius. And so even though it is, you can argue whether or not that's legitimately his position, that became the position associated with what became known as Nestorianism, which was a very popular form of Christianity. It still survives today in the so-called Church of the East, right? So this was the originating point when the Church of the East and the so-called Nestorians separated from the rest of the Church over precisely this question of the relationship between the divine and human natures of Christ, and therefore also the status of Mary as the Mother of God. And so it seems that the Pope at the time, after this council in 431, when Mary was declared to be the Mother of God, the Pope called for this church or this basilica to be built in honor of Mary. And so for that reason, it's very, very significant. It's a beautiful cathedral, or basilica, excuse me, that contains many different chapels and significant relics. For example, right on the main altar, there is a place where it is believed that part of the manger that the infant Christ lay in is in fact in there, and there's a beautiful sort of shrine to that relic. The basilica also contains one of the most significant and famous icons of Mother Mary, called, at least in translation, the protector of the people of Rome. And it's an icon of Mary holding the child Christ with a Bible in his hand. And this is maybe the centerpiece, at least one of the centerpieces of this basilica. In this beautiful chapel, you can see that. I'll probably show an image of it on screen right now. So a very significant church, one of the most important basilicas here in Rome and really for the Catholic Church. So significant that the recently deceased Pope Francis chose to be buried right here. And there is a beautiful, very simple, bare bones burial that you can find there, very much reflective of his style as a pope. You know, he would wear simple clothing. He lived a life of simplicity in imitation of Christ to some degree, but also St. Francis, of course. And that's definitely reflected in the burial place in there, dedicated to Pope Francis. And right now, of course, because at the time of recording this, he only passed about a month ago, I think, a bit more than a month ago. So it's still very fresh, and there are people coming here very much as pilgrims specifically to visit and pay their respects to Pope Francis. So for all these reasons, this is an incredibly important and very beautiful basilica here in Rome, with an incredible history as well as a very significant present. Of course, when you're in Rome, you kind of have to pay a visit to Geodono Bruno. There's a statue of him in Campo de' Fiori, a square quite central in the city, a beautiful statue erected in the 19th century, which very symbolically looks toward the Vatican with a kind of look of disdain and disappointment. Of course, Bruno was a very, very interesting figure who lived in the 16th century. He was executed by being burnt at the stake in this very square in the year 1600 for his supposed heresies. He taught the infinity of the world, that the heliocentric model of the solar system, and a kind of pantheistic, monistic view of God and reality that was very controversial. I very recently actually made a video on Bruno, and making that video, a kind of documentary style video, was one of the main things that I wanted to do in Italy. That was one of the key ambitions that I had going in, that I really wanted to make that video. So if you want to know more about Bruno and see my footage from the square and from significant places associated with him, then check out that video. Of course, when you're talking about a city like Rome, which has such a long and ancient history, these people that we're talking about, even though it seems like they lived a long time ago, like Bruno, or the construction of the Sistine Chapel or St. Peter's Square or Basilica, these are quite new developments in the city compared to how old it actually is. Rome has existed for millennia at this point, and even before Christianity became a thing in the city, it had already had a long history of religious traditions, buildings, and cultural developments, some of which still stand to this very day, amazingly, and you can visit them today. This behind me is the Pantheon, one of the most famous landmarks and historical buildings in all of Rome and really kind of in all of the world. It is an ancient building. It's a completely round one, except for the portico that you see with the columns in front of the gate. Other than that, it's a complete rotunda that has a beautiful, really special kind of hole in the ceiling where the sun shines through when people think that it was probably used as a kind of sundial back in ancient times. The origins of the building are, the different layers to it, right? So originally it was built or ordered to be built by a guy called Marcus Agrippa, and this was maybe back in the latest of the BCs, around year 1 basically. That original building burnt down, however, and the one that we see here is primarily the one built by the Emperor Hadrian, and this is around the year 125 AD. The intent of the building, what it was that it was a temple originally. It's a temple dedicated to the gods. Now, the word Pantheon, it's Greek. Pan means all, and theos, or theon rather, means gods in plural. So this means all of the gods. So one of the theories, the most popular theory about the purpose of the temple is that it was a temple dedicated to all the gods of the Pantheon, right? And similarly, in the rotunda, there would have been statues in kind of like small, like chapels almost, but like there would have been statues of the major gods of the Greek/Roman Pantheon in the rotunda. That's one theory. That's the most popular theory, probably. Another theory is that there's an ancient Roman writer who says that it was called the Pantheon because the beautiful, what do you call it? The domed ceiling from the inside looks like the heaven, that it represents the heaven, and thus that, all the gods are seen as being to some degree in the heavens, and therefore it's called the Pantheon, all the gods. In the 7th century, the building was repurposed basically to a church dedicated to Mary and the martyrs, and it remains a church even today. And this, to some people, this might be unfortunate that a building is appropriate in that way, but actually this is the reason why it has survived for so long, because it's been in use since ancient times. Right now, of course, the old statues and images of the gods are no longer there because it's a Christian building. Instead, there are statues and images of martyrs and Mary and Christian symbols, basically. So right now we're inside the Pantheon itself, and you can see the rotunda here. There are all these little chapels. There's one of Jesus on the cross, for example. There is the altar. We've got some beautiful images of paintings of Mary, of Jesus. So back in the day before this was repurposed into a Christian or Catholic church, each of these chapels would have had statues or images of the gods of the Greek and Roman Pantheon. But the general building would have been basically the same, right? So it's a really interesting example of the kind of religious appropriation that we see so often in history when all buildings or sites are repurposed to serve a new religious paradigm, and that was the case here. Up there, of course, is the incredible maybe centerpiece of the whole thing. You've got the beautiful sun entering there through the thing in the roof. You can imagine why people would have looked at this and thought that it resembled the heavens in some way, right? You see the dome itself is almost like the sky, and then the circle in the middle would be like the sun shining through. That would, of course, have fit a kind of Christian worldview as well, in terms of its symbolism, because the one source of light shining through can very easily also represent that kind of monotheistic view of God and how God's light shines down upon us, right? So you can see why the building didn't have to be changed that much in order for it to be used, even for Christians, right? So just an incredibly beautiful building in so many different ways. the domed roof is the largest unsupported dome in the world still to this day, which is just incredible. And it's really a testament to Roman engineering that it stood the test of time. When someone like Platinus lived here in Rome and worked here in Rome, the great Neoplatonist philosopher, the Pantheon would have stood here. Maybe he visited this place, for example, although, as we know from his biography, he wasn't a huge fan of going to temples or visiting the gods. He famously said that they should come to him rather than him coming to them. But it's not impossible that he would have visited a place like this. So the Pantheon, an incredibly significant historical building that has stood here for thousands of years. After Rome, we made our way to the beautiful city of Naples, or Napoli, in southern Italy. Now, this is a very different place compared to Rome, but is also very beautiful and very significant historically. Of course, the main thing I did here again was to visit some of the places significant in the life of Geodono Bruno and get some footage of that. So again, check out that video. But I also met up with my good friend and colleague here on YouTube, Dr. Angela Puka, who owns the channel Angela Symposium. We went to some of these places together, had a really great time, and it's a pleasure to call her my friend and also to spend time with her in her native city and with some of her also very kind and beautiful friends and family. Napoli might not have the grand and famous tourist attractions like Rome does, but it still has some really interesting little churches and local cultural traditions that are very, very unique. And I really enjoyed my time in this city, both for the company and, of course, the pizza, but also for these smaller, more intricate churches and religious places, historical places that I found just so fascinating. If you've ever been to Naples or Napoli, you will have no doubt noticed that they really, really like the Argentinian football player Diego Maradona. There are murals of him everywhere, images. Here, for example, this is a street where there's a bunch of Christian Catholic art. There are scenes of the manger and birth of Christ, and then right beneath there is an image of Maradona. There are statues of him over there, like little busts of him right beneath images of Christ, right? So this is really interesting. This is like a research project waiting to happen for anyone that's studying religion. There's even like a shrine to Maradona, just a few minutes walk that way. And some say it's tongue-in-cheek, which I'm sure it is to some degree, right? They treat him like a saint almost. Others seem to take it a bit more seriously, because it is interesting how, for example, football and sports can often function in the same way as a religion, especially from a sort of sociological Durkheimian perspective. Football and sports often function in very much the same way as a religion does. It has the symbols, it has the community and the identity formation. It has, in this case, maybe we could compare the cult of Maradona to kind of a saint in Catholicism, right? So this is a really interesting aspect of the city. When you walk the streets here in Naples, you will see right now it's even more so because the local team just won the championship. So there's like football banners everywhere. And right over there, actually, is another example of the Maradona cult. You can see an image of Maradona with a kind of halo around him, right? So really sort of the imagery of a Catholic saint in many ways. It's really fascinating. So look at this. Here's a bunch of religious art. There's Mary, there's Jesus, and then of course there's Saint Maradona right next to it. It's quite striking. It's. And why would an Argentinian football player be so popular here? Well, it's because he used to play for the local team, and he was, of course, a star player that really helped the local team succeed back in the day. So if you come to Naples, then you should expect a lot of Diego Maradona. The last stop on our trip was to go to Milan, which was quite the contrast compared to Naples. Milano is, of course, in northern Italy, in the region of Lombardo. And the reason we went there was mostly to kind of cool down after a couple of days of working, but also especially to meet up with a cousin of mine who is currently studying there. So for the most part, these were just a couple of days of relaxation and enjoying our time there. However, there is, of course, one very significant religious building in this city. The Duomo in Milano is one of the largest churches in Italy and really the world. This is the second largest church in all of Italy. You can see it here behind me. It's just absolutely enormous building, incredibly ornate, very, very beautiful. It is the main cathedral here in the city. It's the seat of the Archbishop of Milan. It's also a cathedral dedicated to Mary, specifically Santa Maria Nascente, the St. Mary of the Nativity. It was built, the story about the building process of this church is quite fascinating. It took almost 600 years to build this cathedral. The building started in the 14th century, in the Middle Ages, and they were putting finishing touches on it as late as, I think, the 1960s. That's just a couple of decades ago. That's just an incredible thing. And so this church has a long history. It's been in use for very long. And even before this particular building was here, there were other churches, sort of main churches of the city here. So for example, back in the time of St. Ambrose, famously in the 4th century, right? There was a church here as well, which this current one is now built on top of. And actually, underneath this church, there are remnants of these old churches and places of baptism. And it is said, although I haven't been able to completely confirm it, maybe I can add a voiceover and if I can confirm it later on, but it is said that the place of baptism underneath this church is where St. Augustine was actually baptized. Famously, he became Christian quite late in his life after a long life of doubt and seeking. And when he came to Milano and met St. Ambrose, that was like a main turning point in his life. And so he and his, at the time, 15-year-old son was supposedly baptized right here behind me. Of course, not in this current church, because this is much later construction, but in the church that stood in the same location, which is currently beneath this current structure. This is an incredibly significant historical location for Christianity and for the Catholic Church for several reasons, not just for the incredible current cathedral that is very important, but also for the history of the location and what came before it. Because of course St. Augustine is, as we have said in previous videos, one of the key figures and most influential and important church fathers, particularly in Western Christianity and Catholicism. So the Duomo in Milano, an incredible place. All in all, Italy is a beautiful place. The people are kind, the food is amazing, of course, and especially if you're interested in history and the study of religions, there are few places in the world that are just as full of things to see and do. Every time I come, I really enjoy it, and of course I feel like I should have stayed much longer to go to some of the other cities, see many of the other sites that I wasn't able to see this time, but that I have to wait for a future trip and for more videos in the future, which I'm really looking forward to. For now, I hope you enjoyed this little trip with me to Italy. This is a bit different from my usual content, of course, but I really enjoy doing these on-location videos as well, so I hope you liked it as well. Thank you so much for listening and for watching, and I'll see you next time.